Muhammad Raza, Bismillah, you're ready to go.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وسلم فجر.
محمد وعلى محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین دمشق میں جو اسیروں کا قافلہ پہنچا یزید نحس نے دربار میں بلا بھیجا بہن سے شہ کی شہادت کا واقعہ پوچھا تڑپ کے بنت علی نے یزید سے یہ کہا زمین کی گود میں اسلام کا ستارہ ہے زمین کی گود میں اسلام کا ستارہ ہے میرے حسین کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین کہا یزید سے زینب نے ایسے تمہارا غضب کیا تیرے لشکر نے روز عاشورا میرے حسین کو جنگل میں گھیر کر مارا میرے حسین کو جنگل میں گھیر کر مارا نبی کا کر دیا برباد گھر کا گھر سارا جو بے کفن ہے ابھی تک نبی کا پیارا ہے جو بے کفن ہے ابھی تک نبی کا پیارا ہے میرے حسین کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین سہاگ اجڑا کسی کا کسی کی کوک جلی کسی کا جل گیا دامن رضا کسی کی چھنی کسی کی مانگ میں کرب و بلا کی خاک پڑی کسی کی مانگ میں کرب و بلا کی خاک پڑی نبی کی یاد ہے زندہ میں یا علی مددی لئی نسبت پیمبر کا سر اتارا ہے، لئی نسبت پیمبر کا سر اتارا ہے، میرے حسین کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، وہ میرے آن محمد، وہ میرے نور نظر، میں تجھ کو ڈھونڈوں کہاں بے زباں علی اصغر، بتاؤ بیویو روؤں میں آج کس کس پر، بتاؤ بیویو روؤں میں آج کس کس پر، شہید ہو گئے عباس و قاسم و اکبر، جہاں میں زینب دلگیر بے سہارا ہے، جہاں میں زینب دلگیر بے سہارا ہے، میرے حسین کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، یہ رنج و غم ستم و زور اور جفا کب تک، رسول زادیاں بلوے میں بیردا کب تک، رہے گی قید میں اولاد مرتضیٰ کب تک، رہے گی قید میں اولاد مرتضیٰ کب تک، نبی کی آل پہ یہ ظلم ناروا کب تک، مجھے تو موت ہی عالم میں اب گوارا ہے، مجھے تو موت ہی عالم میں اب گوارا ہے، میرے حسین کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، نہ مرتے مرتے کسی ایک کو ملا پانی، نہ مرتے مرتے کسی ایک کو ملا پانی، نہ بے کسوں کے قریب آیا بے وفا پانی، ارے تڑپ کے رہ گئے بچے نہ مل سکا پانی، وہ تڑپے پانی کو ان پہ تڑپ گیا پانی، زمین جلتی ہے ہر ذرہ ایک شرارہ ہے، زمین جلتی ہے ہر ذرہ ایک شرارہ ہے، میرے حسین کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل الفاتحة.
محمد وآل محمد امتحانی عاشقی عاشقی میں کیف پاتے ہیں حسین انتہائی مشکلوں میں مسکراتے ہیں حسین لا فتح الا علی لا سیف الا ذوالفقار لا فتح الا علی لا سیف الا ذوالفقار پڑھتے جاتے ہیں فرشتے بڑھتے جاتے ہیں حسین امتحان عاشقی میں درود بھیجیے بھائی محمد و آل محمد اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد فاتحہ جب کربلا سے سیبتے نبی کے حرام چلے جب کربلا سے سیبتے نبی کے حرام چلے سجاد ساتھ رانڈوں کے بچشم نام چلے ہم راہ لے کے قافلہ رنجو غم چلے سینا پکاری پیٹ کے سر بھائی ہم چلے الفت جو تھی کمال شہ مشرقین سے روئی لپٹ لپٹ کے مزار حسین سے ارے روئی لپٹ لپٹ کے مزار حسین سے گرد پھر کے لاش کے زہرا کی میں لقا بولی کہ السلام علیک اے شہ خدا فرمائیے میں جا کہ وطن میں کروں گی کیا حیا جدا ہوتی ہے یہ غم کی مبتلا رہ رہ کے دھیان آتا ہے مجھے دل ملول کو کیا جا کے منہ دکھاؤں گی قبر رسول کو کیا جا کے منہ دکھاؤں گی قبر رسول کو بھیا میں بن تمہارے
وطن میں نہ جاؤں گی، بھیا تمہاری قبر پہ آنسو بہاؤں گی، نالوں سے آسمان و زمین کو ہلاؤں گی، نامی حسین پیاسوں کو پانی پلاؤں گی، جو پوچھے گا تو روتی ہے کیوں شور و شہر سے، کہہ دوں گی چھوٹ گئی ہوں میں بھائی حسین سے، کہہ دوں گی چھوٹ گئی ہوں میں بھائی حسین سے، سجاد رو کے کرتے تھے زینب سے یہ سخن، چلیے پھوپھی خدا کے لیے اب سوئے وطن، رو رو کے جان دو نہ یہاں بیر ظلم ہونا ہے قید ہم کو دوبارہ بسر نہ، روزے پہ نانا جان کے اب جا کے روئیے، دلوں کے زخم پشت پہ دکھلا کے روئیے، ارے دلوں کے زخم پشت پہ دکھلا کے روئیے، یہ سن کے اٹھی قبر سے روتی وہ سوگوار، ایک ہودج سیاہ میں آخر ہوئی سوار، پہنچے وطن میں جس گھڑی سجاد نام پہلے گئی بقیہ میں زینب جگر بولی لپٹ کے قبر سے اماں دعائیں ہے، تشہیر ہو کے زینب ناشاد آئی ہے، تشہیر ہو کے زینب ناشاد آئی ہے، اماں تمہارے لال پہ کیا کیا ستم ہوئے، لاشے کے ہاتھ انگوٹھی کی خاطر قلم ہوئے، مردے پہ میرے بھائی کے تازہ علم ہوئے، پامال لاش ہو گئی برباد ہم ہوئے، گوہر سکینہ کے بھی اتارے ہیں شیر نے، درے ہماری پشت پہ مارے ہیں شیر نے، درے ہماری پشت پہ مارے ہیں شیر نے، اماں ایک رسی میں بندھوایا تھا ہمیں، سردشت میں حسین کا دکھلایا تھا ہمیں، اور بے کجاوے اونٹوں پہ بٹھلایا تھا ہمیں، عابد کو در مار کے رلوایا تھا ہمیں، حسرت ہے کیوں نہ زینب دلگیر مر گئی، اماں میں سر کھلے ہوئے شیری کے گھر گئی، اماں میں سر کھولے ہوئے شیری کے گھر گئی اماں پھر آیا کوفے میں بیووں کو سر ننگے سوئے شام ہمیں لے گئے پہنچے جو شہر شام میں ہم سب گشادہ منہ بازاریوں میں شور یہ ہوتا تھا چار سو بیٹی علی کی زینب دلگیر آئی ہے دیکھو چلو حسین کی ہمشیر آئی ہے دیکھو چلو حسین کی ہمشیر آئی ہے اماں میرے مریض کو قیدی بنایا تھا گراں بخار میں اس کو پہنایا تھا کانٹوں پہ ننگے پاؤں عدو نے چلایا تھا اماں سوائے شکر نہیں لب ہلایا تھا بلوایا تھا یزید نے دربار عام میں اماں سکینہ مر گئی زندان شام میں اماں سکینہ مر گئی زندان شام میں جب کربلا سے سیبتے نبی کے حرم چلے
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل
رحم اللہ من قرأ سورة الفاتحة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعدم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بمولانا أبي عبد الله الحسين والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ووعدنا موسى 30 ليلة وأتممناها ب10 فتم ميقات ربه 40 ليلة صدق الله العلي العظيم. Tonight we've entered upon the night of the 40th of the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein. We've entered upon the night of Arbaeen. And this Arbaeen is very different from other years because many of us were accustomed to going to the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, yet we haven't been given this opportunity for many of us considering the global situation. But if we are not the Zaireen of Hussein this year, then the Malaika and the angels are the Zaireen of Hussein. No, the Prophet of God is from amongst the visitors of Hussein. No, rather, that mother who comes from Jannatul Baqi, with one hand on her broken rib is the zawar of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Tonight is a night that if we are going to understand what the Arbaeen of Husain is, then we need to understand what the significance of the number 40 is. And this is why the subject of this majlis is an examination of the significance of the number 40 within the Quran and the Hadith literature. Wherever you look across the different traditions and the different religions of the world, you find within each religion, the number 40 carries a great spiritual significance, even outside of the folds of Islam. For example, when you look within the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, you find that the number 40 is repeated, that the period of the flood of Noah within the Bible, 40 days, the period within which that the children of Israel spend in Exodus outside of the Holy Land is 40 years. The period of the embalming of Jacob is for 40 days. So you find in this manner, the number 40 has been repeated throughout the different religious traditions of the world. And in the same way, you find that 40 is mentioned within the hadith time and time again. And from amongst the famous hadith which mention the number 40 are those that refer to the Arbaeen of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. One of these famous hadith, which each and every one of you know, is that hadith of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, when he says, Alamatul mu'min khamsun, that the signs of a believer are 5. Salatu ahda wa khamseen, that the first sign of a believer is that he recites 51 units of prayer every day. The 17 mandatory plus the nawafila and salatul layl, they equal 51. Then after that, he says, وَزِيَارَةُ الْأَرْبَعِينَ, that the power of Sayyid al-Shuhada is that even when it came to be amongst the alamat and the signs of a mu'min, the ziyarah of Husayn ibn Ali was mentioned. Then after that, it says, وَاتَّخَذْتُمْ فِي الْيَمِينَ, a ring upon the right hand, وَتَعْفِيرُ الْجَبِينَ, prostrating upon clay, وَالْجَهْرُ بِبِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ, they say Bismillah loudly. So you find within this tradition, the number 40, it comes up. But the question we need to ask is that what is the significance of the number 40? After all, it is just a number, but what differentiates this number? So you find the answer is that the number 40 within the Islamic hadith literature and across the other traditions in the world has been considered the number of completion and the number of perfection, what we call in Arabic takamul. You see, 40 days is a period of completion. And in this manner, from the day of Ashura, upon which Sayyid al-Shuhada was martyred until the day of Arbaeen, we are seeking to complete a journey. And that journey is our understanding of Husain. So you may ask me that if I say the number 40 is the number of completion, what proof do I have for this? And one famous example is the verse from the Quran in Surah Al-A'raf, where Allah, he speaks of Musa going to Mount Sinai, Tur Sinin. When Musa, he goes there, initially Musa goes for 30 days. And the Quran, it says, وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلًا, that Musa, his covenant with the Lord to go towards Allah, it was for 30 days. But then after that, it says, وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ, that 10 more completed it. فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ 40 لَيْلًا, that the covenant of Moses with his Lord was completed, the word completion, in how long? In 40 nights. So over here in this ayat of the Quran, you find that the idea of completion is mentioned next to the number 40. This is why any interval, especially of time related to the number 40, has been given great significance within the hadith literature, because the number 40 is a number which has been associated with the spiritual development of a human being. For example, one tradition associated with the period of 40 days, it states that Rasulullah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, he states that man akhlasa lillahi arba'ina sabahan daharat yanabi'ul hikmati min qalbihi ala lisanih, that the one who makes himself sincere to Allah, or he devotes himself sincerely to Allah, we can have a difference of translation, Allah will make the wellsprings of wisdom come from his heart upon his tongue. So the number 40, over here, a 40-day period of devoting oneself to Allah spiritually within the traditions has been considered a great act and an act of developing the spirit of a human being. You see over here, it says, Man akhlasa lillahi arba'ina sabahan. That's why many of our ulama who are inclined towards the thought and the school of the Urafa, many times in their lives, they would have a 40-day period of devotion. For example, the famous scholar Syed Mahdi Baharul Ulum, he says that I carried out 40 of these Arbaeens, 40 of these 40-day devotional periods. And this is why when you look amongst the advice of our ulama, you find that there are many du'as, their recitation has been emphasized for a period of 40 days. For example, it is stated that when you need a hajat, an important hajat accepted, that the one who recites Ziyaratul Ashura or Dua Tawassul after Salatul Fajr for 40 mornings, his dua will be accepted. The same has been said about Dua al-Mashlul, and there are various duas I don't have the time to get into. Their potency and their actualization is completed upon a period of 40. For example, Dua al-Ahad, this powerful dua where one seeks to renew his covenant with the Imam of his time, to the point that the hadith it states that the one who recites this dua for 40 mornings, he will be with the Imam upon his uprising, Imam Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajuhu al-Sharif. So over here, we find that when it comes to the realm of dua and the acceptance of hajat, there is an emphasis on 40 days. When it comes to the development of the spirit, there is an emphasis on 40 days. When it comes to the cycle of the forgiveness of sins, there is an emphasis on 40 days. Tonight is Arbaeen. I'm mentioning all of those hadith which mention Arbaeen and the number 40. We have different hadith which even in the way that they emphasize the spiritual cycle of 40 days. And we had the hadith which mentioned 40 days related to du'as. You find that the number 40 is also associated with repentance and the atonement for a sin. For example, the famous hadith that says that the one who drinks alcohol, that person, his salat is not accepted for 40 days. Now, this doesn't mean you're exempted from praying. But what this goes to show is that 40 days is a period of atonement. And we have another hadith which says that the one who backbites and does the ghiba of another believer, you find that his prayer is not accepted for 40 days. So 40 days over here has this significance. Now we've examined these different categories associated with the period of 40 days. In the same way, you find the time interval of 40 weeks has a great emphasis. And you know what it has a great connection with? Many of the a'mal and the actions to carry out related to the imam of our time are to be carried out for a period of 40 weeks. You see it stated, for example, that the one who visits Masjid al-Sahla for 40 Tuesday nights will have the honor of meeting Imam Sahib al-Zaman. And there were ulama such as Al-Allam al-Hilli who carried this action out. It stated that upon the 40th Tuesday night, Al-Allam al-Hilli was returning. A man comes to Al-Allam al-Hilli. He says to him, "Oh man, you look like you are thinking of something and you're in a state of worry." Allam al-Hilli says, "Oh man, you're not able to help me. I'm thinking of the matter of a hadith." He says, "No, perhaps I'll have an answer." Allam al-Hilli says, "Is that what I am thinking is of the hadith that says that tears the size of the wings of a mosquito for Hussein are able to forgive sins the size of an ocean. He says, how is it possible that tears so small can forgive such great sins? The man says, let me give you a story. There was once a king, and that king went hunting. As he went hunting, he got lost from his guards and his entourage. And he became hungry, he became thirsty, he became desperate. He came to the house of a lady and her son. That lady and her son, they take that king in. They show such hospitality to that king to the extent that it's stated they had one animal. They sacrificed that one animal to feed the king. That king, as he was leaving, he was saying that if you ever need anything, then come to me, I will help you. A number of years go by. It was a time of famine. That lady and her son, they go to the king. They say to the king that, do you remember us? We helped you when you were lost. That king, he says, of course I remember you. So you find that the king, he looks to his ministers. He says that this lady, she gave away her only animal and gave it for me as sustenance when I had nothing. And that was all they had. What should I give them? One of the ministers says, give them some gold. The king says, no, you're being unjust. The other minister says, give them part of your kingdom. He says, no, you're being unjust. They say, what do you mean? He says that if they gave away everything they had for me when I was in need, the only just thing is I give away everything I have to them. That man says, he didn't say, Allam al-Hilli didn't introduce himself. That man, he says, oh Allam al-Hilli, if a regular king can give away his entire kingdom for the sacrifice of one animal, can Allah, the King of Kings, not give away his mercy for the sacrifice of Hussein? And then he says, oh Allam al-Hilli, as for the second thing which you worry about, whether you'll meet the Imam if you go to Masjid al-Sahla for 40 Tuesday nights, then the Imam of your time stands in front of you, O Allam al-Hilli. You see, the tears of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, do not doubt the power of the tears of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Yes, they aren't a free license for us to do whatever we want. But the reality of the tears of Imam al-Hussein is that these tears for Sayyid al-Shuhada are able to elevate the soul of an individual. And particularly when it relates to this 40-day mourning period. Because in Islam, according to the hadith, the mourning period is of 40 days. It's stated within the tradition of Imam al-Sadiq that when Qabil killed Habil, that period was for 40 days. You see, these tears for Sayyid al-Shuhada, there are many traditions which show the greatness of these tears. One tradition, it states, كُلُّ يَوْمٍ بَاقِيَةٌ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِلَّا عَيْنٌ بَكَتْ عَلَى مُصَابِ الْحُسَيْنِ, that every eye on the day of judgment will be in tears, except for that eye which cries over the musibah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You want to understand what the power of this tradition is. You know, there is one more tradition which has similar wording. And within that tradition, it's stated those acts of ibadat for Allah will prevent the eyes from crying on the day of judgment. That tradition says, كُلُّ عَيْنٍ بَاقِيَةٌ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِلَّا ثَلَاثٍ, that every eye will cry on the day of judgment except three. The first eye which won't cry on the day of judgment is the one that closes itself from looking at haram and what Allah has prohibited. The second eye which won't cry on the day of judgment is the one that stays awake at night in the worship of Allah. And the third eye which won't cry on the day of judgment is that eye which sheds tears out of the fear of Allah. The greatness of the Masayib of Hussein and shedding tears over the Masayib of Hussein is this, is that when the Imams, they use the hadith and they use the terminology of preventing fear and tears through the ibadat of Allah, they have a similar hadith in wording which mentions the musibah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, that these tears for Sayyid al-Shuhada were considered an act of ibadah to the extent that when you look in Al-Kafi and you look in Babul Kitman, there is a hadith of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam where Imam al-Sadiq, he says, Nafasul mahmum lana al-mughtam li dulmina tasbih. That even that sorrowful breathing, you know, when you're in sorrow and your breath becomes heavy and your heart fills with anxiety, even that sorrowful breathing for our masayib is considered the tasbih of Allah. So you see, the tears for Hussein have this reality. So this discussion, it began. I examined 40 days and the 3 categories of hadith related to 40 days. Over here, we examined the period of 40 weeks, and the final period related to the number 40, which carries great significance within the life of man, is the period of 40 years. You know, Sayyid Mahdi Bahrul Ulum, he quotes a tradition about the age of 40. He says, Man balagha arba'een walam ya'khudil asa faqad asa. That the one who reaches the age of 40 and he has not taken up a staff to walk with, he has deviated. Now, what does this tradition mean? Does this tradition mean that if you're above the age of 40, that you should walk around with a stick? No, the interpretation of the asa and the staff within this hadith is that the stick is seen as a companion of a journey. That when somebody goes on a journey, right, they take an asa with them. This tradition, it means that if you reach the age of 40 and you haven't begun your spiritual journey to Allah, then you've deviated. Because after 40, sins aren't forgiven in the same way anymore. After 40, that leniency is gone. Now, does this mean that after the age of 40, you won't be forgiven? Absolutely not. Allah, He says that even until the point that your soul reaches the throat, I will forgive my servants. But what this means is that perhaps in your youth, you may have had excuses. You may have not had experience. You may have had your desires overflowing, but now you've reached an age that Allah, according to the tradition, He says to the malaika, now that he's reached the age of 40, be strict with them. Don't be as lenient with them. You see, there are 3 ages in the life of man which carry great significance. The first is the age of bulugh, when you become baligh, when you become mature, right? At that age, responsibility is mandatory on you. Now what God has made mandatory, you carry out. And what God has made prohibited, you stay away. But after that, the second age of significance is the age of 33. The age of 33 is that age when your body is seen to be at its peak. The age of 33 is the age when Isa and Jesus ascended to the heaven. The age of 33 is the age Amir al-Mu'mineen was on the day of Ghadir. The age of 33 is the age of the heavenly bodies according to the tradition on heaven. But after that, it's stated that after 40, the intellect of a human being is completed. That after 40, your intellectual prowess has reached its peak. You can gain knowledge, but your gaining of knowledge will be via experience. So it's shown that in the way 40 days was the completion of a spiritual cycle and 40 weeks was the completion of a spiritual cycle, in the same way 40 years is the completion of a cycle. And we have many traditions which mention 40 without referring to even a time interval. For example, when it's stated that when you make dua and you pray for 40 individuals before you pray for yourself, Allah accepts that dua, and there are many other traditions. But those traditions, which are my focus for tonight, are the traditions which speak about the Arbaeen of Husaini. You see, it's stated that for 40 days, the skies, they wept for Sayyid al-Shuhada. That for 40 days, we on the 40th, according to the Imams, we recite Ziyaratul Arbaeen. And within Ziyaratul Arbaeen, we say, Ya Aba Abdullah, the reason and the philosophy behind your movement, لِيَسْتَنْقِذَ عِبَادَكَ مِنَ الْجَهَالَةِ وَحَيْرَةِ الدَّلَالَةِ, that, oh Allah, we testify that Hussein, he had this movement to save the servants of yours from ignorance and from the confusions of misguidance. You see, the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada was a movement of the hearts and the movement of the spirits. This is why the movement of Hussein is timeless. You know, to examine this movement, صلي على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. As I was saying, that the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada, we realize through the Ziyarah of Arbaeen, that the movement of Imam al-Hussein is beyond the realm of time and space and historical analysis only. You know, we study the history, and the history allows us to understand the purpose behind the movement. But to only examine Karbala from a historical lens is to fall into the trap of historicism. The trap of historicism states that the fundamental motivating factor behind human action is history. Those who examine Karbala from this angle, when they speak about why Imam al-Hussein went to Karbala, they'll say that Muawiyah died. He told his son Yazid to get allegiance from Imam al-Hussein. When that letter goes towards Medina, Imam al-Hussein goes to Mecca. The people of Kufa call the Imam. The Imam on the way to Kufa is betrayed. He's killed in Karbala. This is Karbala. But no, Karbala is beyond this. Karbala is such a reality that it is far above just historical analysis. And I'll give you a very practical example. You know, the genre of literature, right, which talks about the Masayib of Sayyid al-Shuhada and his martyrdom is called Maqatil. In Islamic history, this was not the only genre of literature. We had a genre such as Tarikh, which speaks of history. We had Maghazi, which speaks about the battle and the military expeditions of Rasulullah. And we have the Seerah of the Prophet and the biography of the Prophet. But there is no other genre of literature which is remembered in the way this Maqatil of Hussein is, that year in, year round, you gather as an act of devotion to listen to the Musibah of Hussein. The Musibah, it doesn't change, but year in, year out, you're able to cry for Abu Abdullah. That what is it? What is it that allows you to hear the same story every year and shed tears? And that is that element which is above history. And that is the element of the connection of the hearts and the tranquility of the spirit which Abu Abdullah al-Hussein he gives. You see, historical principle dictates that the more time goes on, the more an event is forgotten. But the more time goes, the more the remembrance of Hussein is carried out. We saw in the past years how many would gather for the Arbaeen of Hussein. 20 million, 25 million, 27 million. You know, there were members of your community. I remember seeing them on ziyarah with me. That this was the ziyarah of Hussein, that year in, year out, more and more people are going. So events, they dictate, history dictates, the more time goes, the more an event is forgotten. But for Imam al-Hussein, this isn't the case. No, history dictates the more people are impacted, the more the event is remembered. But Hussein only had 72 according to the famous account. History dictates that the more geopolitical significance an area has, the more an event is remembered. But no, Hussein was in a desert. Today, even despite all of these factors, the name of Hussein, it rings. And you know, one element, how the name of Sayyid al-Shuhada continues, is because the efforts of his sister Sayyida Zainab. That Sayyida Zainab, who was called Sharikatul Hussein, the one who was called the one who was with Aba Abdullah. You know, tonight I didn't come to lecture in length. Tonight I came to recite the Masaib of the Arbaeen of Imam al-Hussein. But to understand the Masaib of the Arbaeen of Imam al-Hussein, you have to understand the Musibah of the day of Ashura. Because many of you, you've had family members pass away, and you can testify to what I'm saying. That there are two moments which are the most difficult upon the passing of a family member. The first is when you get news of their passing. When you hear of their passing for the first time, it's a moment of shock. It's a moment of agony that they're with you no more. But the second time, all of those emotions, they refresh and they become new, is when you go to the grave for the first time. That the first of these for Sayyida Zainab was the day of Ashura, the second was the day of Arbaeen. That how did Sayyida Zainab see her brother within his final moments? It stated that when Imam al-Hussein, he fell towards the ground, the maqatil, they state that Imam al-Hussein had so many arrows within his body that the maqatil, they say that the body of Hussein, it resembled a hedgehog. It resembled that animal which has spikes all over it from the amount the arrows went through the body of Hussein. It stated that the army of Umar bin Saad, they surround Sayyid al-Shuhada from all sides, that people would fire arrows. Those who didn't have arrows, they would throw rocks to the body of Sayyid al-Shuhada. It stated Sayyida Zainab, she comes out of the tents at that moment. She sees her brother is surrounded. She sees Shimmer walking to the body of Hussein. She says, Anta akhi, that are you my brother Hussein? She looks towards Umar bin Saad. She says, oh Umar bin Saad, you stand there, the grandson of Rasulullah. My brother is about to be slaughtered at this moment. This is the musibah of Sayyida Zainab. But I say, oh Zainab, Karbala was just the beginning of your musibah. Karbala was just the beginning of your masaib. After that, the journey it begins. The journey from Kufa. But then after that came a Sham. You know, when they said to Imam Zainul Abidin, they said, oh Zainul Abidin, what was the most difficult moment in this? The Imam didn't say it was the martyrdom of his father. The Imam didn't say Karbala. The Imam didn't say going towards Ibn Ziyad. The Imam said Asham, Asham, Asham. The Imam said it 3 times. You know, there were 3 places in Sham that broke the hearts of Ahlul Bayt. The first of them was the bazaar and the marketplace of Sham. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir has a tradition where he describes how Ahlul Bayt Bayt, they entered that marketplace. It stated that the people, they had decorated the marketplace. The people began to celebrate. There were people who would throw rocks at Ahlul Bayt. They would say, these bughat, these baghi, these transgressors have come. It stated that they would pour boiling water upon the family of Ali Muhammad from the roofs of the houses, to the point that it stated that the turban of Imam Zainul Abidin, at one point it begins to catch on fire. You know, it stated that when Ahlul Bayt was within that marketplace, the famous companion of Rasulullah by the name of Sahal bin Sa'ad al-Sa'idi was there. When he gets towards Sham, he says, is there an Eid and a celebration in Sham that I don't know about? Why are the people decorated in this manner? Why is it so festive? The man says, O Sal, O companion of Rasulullah, do not be surprised if the heavens crash upon the earth. Sal says, what do you mean? That man, he says, the family of the Prophet has been brought. This is why the people are celebrating. Sal bin Sa'd al-Sa'idi, he goes to Imam Zainul Abidin. He says, O Ali ibn al-Husayn, I am the companion of your grandfather Rasulullah. I am your well-wisher. Is there anything I can do for you? Imam Zainul Abidin said, there is one thing you can do. You can go and get a piece of cloth for me. Sal says, I don't understand why he wanted the piece of cloth. I took the piece of cloth to him. You know what Imam Zainul Abidin did with that cloth? He puts it within his chain from Karbala to Kufa to Sham, that within the desert the neck of Zainul Abidin would burn from the metal upon that chain. You find after that, the second difficult moment was that moment when they enter the courtyard of Sham. When they enter that courtyard of Sham, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says that we sat like servants, and we sat in that spot as servants, they said. It stated that when they were entering the courtyard, Sayyida Zainab, she sees a lady sitting next to Yazid. She says, oh, Kulthum, do you recognize that lady? Kulthum says, I don't. Sayyida Zainab says, that is Hind, who used to be a servant within our home. You find that when the Ahlul Bayt, they come, the head of Imam al-Husayn is placed in front of Yazid. Yazid, he takes his stick, he begins to poke the teeth of the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada. At that point, there was a man who was there in the time of Rasulullah. He says, oh Yazid, I would see the Prophet of God kiss that head which you are hitting with the stick right now. Yazid says, go and take this man away. After that, you find that the wife of Yazid, she comes down. She says, who are you? Where are you from? Min ayyi biladin antum? They say, nahnu min bilad al-Madina, that we are from Medina. She comes, she sits on the ground. She says, I used to work in a house in Medina. Sayyida Zainab said, where did you work? She says, I would work in the house of Ali and Fatima. Sayyida Zainab says, whom do you know within that house? She says, I know my mistress Sayyida Zainab. I know Kulthum. I know Hussein. Sayyida Zainab says, oh Hind, that is the head of Hussein. She says, oh Hind, I am Zainab. Oh Hind, this is Kulthum. That what did Karbala do to Sayyida Zainab? That they didn't recognize Sayyida Zainab after Karbala. You find this was the court of Sham. And the third difficult moment, I don't have the strength to recite is that prison in Sham where Yazid, he sent the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada to a 3.5-year-old girl that when she held the head of her father, she fell to the ground. And Imam Zain al-Abidin would say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You see, when Ahlul Bayt, they were in the court of Yazid, right? People, they began to recognize who Ahlul Bayt were. You find one man who wasn't a Muslim. He says, oh Yazid, in my town, there was the hooves of the donkey of Jesus. We would go as Christians and pay respect to that town. Oh Yazid, but you killed the grandson of your prophet. You find a point it comes where Yazid has to let Ahlul Bayt go. Otherwise, the entire Umayyad government would topple. When Yazid, he frees Ahlul Bayt, Imam Zainul Abidin says, I have conditions. The first is that those heads of the martyrs you return to us. The second is that those items which you took from us, you return to us. The third is that you give us a house where we can mourn, because these women haven't been able to mourn properly. You find Ahlul Bayt, they go towards that house. The women, they began to cry. You know, I recite the Masaib to you, and you cry by listening to the Musibah. But these are those women who saw Karbala. To listen and to see is different. They didn't have to recite the Musibah. All they had to say was, Wa Husaina. They would remember Ashura. One lady would say, Wa Abbasa. Another would say, Wa Ali Akbara. Another would say, Wa Qasima. In this manner they would mourn. After that, those items, they begin to come back. The first thing which comes back, according to the tradition, it stated that a shirt which was ripped, it comes back. Sayyidah Zainab says that this is that shirt my mother Fatima sewed. It was the shirt Hussein wore on the day of Ashura. That the moment he got that shirt, he began to rip that shirt. They said, oh Hussein, why are you ripping the shirt? Abu Abdullah says that I know they'll take everything from me, but maybe if I rip the shirt, they'll leave it on my body. You find the shirt, it came. After that, a flag, it comes. A alam, it comes. It was the flag of Abu Fadl Abbas. I don't know what Sayyidah Zainab must have felt when she saw that flag of Abbas. After that, I don't know if you'll be able to listen. It stated 2 earrings, they come back. All of the women, they look towards Rabab. These were the earrings of the daughter of Rabab, of Sakina, that were taken on the night after Ashura. After that, a ring, it comes back. You know, as everyone was looting the body of Hussein, somebody would take the amama and the turban. Somebody would take the shirt. But one man, he says, that as I looked at Hussein, I saw that there was a ring on the hand of Hussein. That man, he says, that when I would try to pull the ring wouldn't come off. He says that at that moment, I took my dagger, I cut the finger of Hussein together. He says, I cut the finger of Hussein to get that ring. After that, the heads, they begin to come back. When the heads, they come back, Layla takes the head of Ali Akbar. Farwa takes the head of Qasim. Abba Kulthum takes the head of Abbas. As all of the heads are coming back, there were 2 heads that nobody took those heads. You know whose heads they were? It was the heads of on in Muhammad that Sayyidah Zainab, if there was one head that she took towards her, it was that moment when the head of Sayyidah Shuhada was brought. When the head was brought, all of the women, they stand, they began to say, Wa Husaina, Wa Ghariba. They begin to mourn in this manner. Then that point it comes. Ahlul Bayt, they depart from Sham as they're going towards Medina. A point it comes that the road, it goes in two routes. Either it goes to Karbala or it goes towards Medina. The moment Imam Zainul Abidin asked which route should we go, all of the women, they began to say, Oh Sajjad, take us towards Karbala. Ahlul Bayt, they begin to go towards Karbala. But you know who was in Karbala at that moment? Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari was in Karbala. The companion of Rasulullah, Jabir. The one whom Rasulullah sent his salams to, Jabir. It stated that Jabir was blind. Jabir was with the servant Atiyah. He says, Oh Atiyah, show me where the grave of Hussein is. Atiyah says, Jabir, there is the grave of Hussein. Jabir looks at the grave of Abu Abdullah. On a day like this, he says, Assalamu alayka ya khamis ashab al-kisa. That salam be upon the final member of the people of the cloak. Jabir looks at the grave. Jabir says, Oh Hassan, every time I would come to you, you would come towards me. Oh Hassan, why is it that you don't come? It stated at that moment, Jabir and his servant, the servant of Jabir sees the caravan of Ahlul Bayt. Atiyah, he says that, Oh Jabir, a caravan is coming. Jabir says, Oh Atiyah, be careful. Perhaps it is Ibn Ziyad. You find Jabir. He says, Oh Atiyah, are there any men from amongst this caravan? Atiyah says, Oh Jabir, most of them are women. Some of them are children. But oh Jabir, there is an old man who's at the front of that caravan. Jabir goes, he says to that man, Oh man, whom are you? He says, Oh Jabir, we are the house of Ahlul Bayt, oh Jabir. He says, Oh Jabir, oh Hussein has been killed. Oh Jabir, they took the hijab of my aunts. Oh Jabir, they put a chain around our necks. Oh Jabir, they tied our arms. Oh Jabir, they would hit us with the spears. Jabir says, Oh man, you've told me the entire musibah, but oh man, who are you? He says, Oh Jabir, I am Ali ibn al-Hussein. I am Zainul Abidin. Jabir begins to cry. Jabir says, Oh Zainul Abidin, Atiyah says that there was an old man in this caravan. Oh Ali ibn al-Hussein, you were in your youth. Imam Zainul Abidin says, Oh Jabir, what can I say except Asham, 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 oh Jabir. After that, the moment it comes, Ahlul Bayt, they begin to go towards the body of Sayyid al-Shuhada, to the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada. All of the women, they go to the grave of Hussein. But it stated that Sayyidah Zainab would go slowly to the grave of Abu Abdullah. These are the final lines of Musibah. Sayyidah Zainab would go slowly to the grave of Abu Abdullah. When she gets to the grave of Abu Abdullah, she says, Oh my brother, forgive me. I say, Oh Zainab, whom whom are you to ask for forgiveness? What did you do? Sayyidah Zainab says, oh my brother, you gave me an amana. You gave me a trust. I left your amana in Sham. I left Sakina in Sham. After that, she says, oh Zainul Abidin, where is the grave of my brother Abbas? Imam Zainul Abidin says, the grave of my uncle is by the Furat. Sayyidah Zainab says, oh women, we are going to Abbas. Tell Abbas everything, but don't tell Abbas. We left Sakina in Sham. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-dhalimin. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. On this night of Arbaeen, on this night we didn't have the opportunity to be in Karbala, but we have full yaqeen that when we send our salam, it reaches Abu Abdullah. But you know, tonight, Imam al-Zaman is the Zahir of Sayyid al-Shuhada. We say, Ya Allah, through the right of Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they are sick and ailing in this difficult time of a global pandemic, cure them. Ya Allah, there are many people who are struggling for their sustenance. There are many people in our communities who are laid off. There are many people who don't know how they'll support their family in this time. On this night of the Arbaeen of Husain, through the right of Husain, give towards them. Oh Allah, there are many people who are going through sickness and illness. There are brothers who have cancer. There are individuals whose family members are in a dire state. There are many who requested me for dua. Ya Allah, through the right of Imam Zainul Abidin, cure them. Ya Allah, on this night, allow us to purify our hearts, allow us to gain your forgiveness and the intercession of Ahlul Bayt. And Ya Allah, we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Sadat Karbala, Sadat Karbala, चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबियां सादात करबला सादात करबला हर बीबी कर रही थी कुछ इस तरह से गिरिया सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबियां सादात करबला सादात करबला कुछ बीबियां यहाँ है कुछ बीबियां वहाँ करती हुई फुहा करती हुई फुहा बिखरी हुई थी मक्तल वाले सरवर में जा बजा सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबियां सादात करबला सादात करबला एक बीबी दश्त खूनी में जाती है नहर पर कहती बचश्म तर कहती बचश्म तर आबास देने आई हूँ पुरसा सकीना का सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबियां सादात करबला सादात करबला घुट घुट के लाडली तेरी जिंदा में मर गई तुरबाद वहीं बनी तुरबाद वहीं बनी भैया वो कैद से ना हुई मर के भी जुदा सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबिया सादात करबला सादात करबला अकबर की कब्र पर यूं हुई लैला नौहगर देखा न साल भर देखा न साल भर आई हूँ कैद शाम से अब हो के मेरे सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबिया सादात करबला सादात करबला बानो ये बहन करती थी है मेरे बेजुबां माँ ढूंढे अब कहाँ माँ ढूंढे अब कहाँ बतला दे है कहाँ मेरा असगर है करबला सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबिया सादात करबला सादात करबला कुर्बान तेरे मेरे माजा के बेवतन मजबूर थी बहन मजबूर थी बहन जिंदा में मुझसे तेरी अमानत हुई जुदा सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को करबला में जब आई वो बीबिया सादात करबला सादात करबला रोते हैं कैसो आम तेरा सुन के ये कलाम ऐ शाह के गुलाम ऐ शाह के गुलाम नौहा तेरा नीस है मकबूल भाई का सादात करबला सादात करबला चहलुम को کربلا میں جب آئی وہ بیبیاں سادات کربلا سادات کربلا یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین نہ محمل ہے نہ ہودج ہے نہ لشکر کی وہ سج دھج ہے نہ سر پہ علم نہ چادر ہے اللہ یہ کیسا منظر ہے مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں سفر سے آتے ہیں سوغات درد لاتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں کیا سلام محمد کے آستانے کو کٹا کے آئے ہیں زہرا کے سب گھرانے کو نہ کر قبول تو ہم بے کسوں کے آنے کو یہ نوحہ کرتے ہیں اور اشک خون بہاتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مدینہ ہم تیرے والی کو آئے ہیں کھو کر مدینہ کوفے میں سرنم یہ ہم پھرے در در مدینہ داغ رسل ہے ہمارے شانوں پر اٹھا کے ہاتھ مدینے کو سب بتاتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں ہر ایک قدم پہ بکا کب لبوں پہ بین نہیں ہمارے زندہ پزہرا کا نور عین نہیں مدینہ اکبر و قاسم نہیں حسین نہیں یہ کیسے جوان تھے جو یاد آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مدینے والوں کہو اس بہن کی کیا تقدیر جو دیکھے اپنے برادر کے حلق پر شمشیر لہو میں غرق جو دیکھے حسین کی تصویر لہو میں کیا یوں ہی بھائی کا سر دکھاتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں اللہم صلی علی محمد آل محمد
متوجه زيارة صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا خيرة خلق الله. السلام عليك يا باعث الهدى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ويا قائد غر المحجلين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك. السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأخيك. السلام عليك وعلى الأئمة من ذريتك وبنيك. السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأخيك. صلى الله عليك وعلى أخيك بالفضل العباس وعلى أختك أم المصائب زينب وعلى ولديك العليين الشهيدين وعلى المستشهدين بين يديك جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا مغيث الشيعة والزوار في يوم الجزاء. السلام عليك يا أنيس النفوس. السلام عليك أيها المدفون بأرض طوس. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا والتحية والثناء. السلام عليك وعلى آبائك السبعة وأبنائك الأربعة. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا قاطع البرهان. السلام عليك يا إمام زماننا هذا. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. اللهم اكتبنا من زوار الحسين واجعلنا من الباكين في عزاء الحسين. اللهم احشرنا تحت لواء الحسين. اللهم احشرنا في زمرة الحسين. اللهم ادخلنا الجنة من باب الحسين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumin. Display it on your screen. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.